Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Rob James and I'm the chair of the committee. Apologies for the unconventional setting that I'm in at the moment. It'll change in due course. Just to make you aware of today's meeting will be recorded. Can I also welcome any press or public that may be in today's meeting? Can I please remind you to switch your phones on silent for the duration of the meeting? In addition, can I refer you to the protocols for remote working, for remote meetings, which have been previously circulated. Namely, your microphone should be switched to mute unless you are speaking. Should you wish to ask a question and make a comment, can you please indicate either via the chat function or by raising your virtual hand via Teams. I will assume that you've all read the paperwork before today's meeting. Please only use the chat function to indicate if you wish to speak as an alternative to the electronic hand function or to raise any technical questions. When asking a question, can you please indicate which page number you're referring to? And when speaking, please introduce yourself. So that's the introduction part. Can we start with the roll call, Alison?
Yes, Chair. So I'll go through members first. Councillor Darren Price.
Present.
Councillor Giles Morgan.
Yep, present.
Councillor Saifa Rahman.
Present.
Councillor Sharon Freegard.
Present.
Councillor Alan Llewellyn.
He's on mute, Alison.
Yes, I can't see him in the list. Councillor Jan Curtis.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yes, yeah.
Councillor Philip Downing.
Yeah, present.
Councillor Jamie Adams. No. Councillor Mike Evans. And Councillor Tony Barron.
Present.
Thank you, members. I'll now go through officers. Mike Shaw.
Sorry, forgive me, I was on mute. Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you. Jonathan Burns.
Yes, Alison, I'm here. Thank you.
Richard Arnold.
Afternoon, I'm here, Alison.
Thank you. Chris Moore.
Chris won't be. Chris will have to send his apologies. I'm afraid, Alison. I'll be taking the financial monitoring report in his place.
Thank you, Richard. Jane Lewis.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Phil Ryder.
Present.
Thank you. And Stacey Curran.
Present, Alison.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm Alison Thomas. And continue the agenda, Chair.
Thank you very much. If we move on to the next agenda point, Chair's announcements. I don't have any announcements to make at the moment. Declarations of interest is all our responsibility to declare any interest you may have in any agenda item. Does anyone have anything to declare at this moment? Please indicate with your hand function or by the chat if you do. No, I can't see anything. So I assume we can carry on. Agenda item number 4. So this is the appointment of the vice chairperson. Firstly, can I, on behalf of the committee, thank our previous vice chair, Mike, for his service on the committee, and I'm sure some officers would be able to pass on our best wishes in Mike's new role.
Yes, sir.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Right. Do we have anyone interested in the vice chair position? Can I have a proposer for any members?
I'd like to propose Councillor Saifa Rahman for Vice Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Freegard. Do I have a second?
Sorry, Rob, I second that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Curtis. Do we have any other interested members? Any other proposals? I can't see any. So can I have a show of hands, virtual hands, to indicate everyone's happy for that appointment? Just take a moment while everyone's voting. appears that's carried. Thank you very much. So, Saif, welcome you to the position and also to the committee. Having previously been on council with you in the past, I know you're a very dedicated councillor and very much passionate about your community and the wider area. So I want to welcome you formally to the committee.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you all for the welcome. I look forward to being part of this dynamic group and discussion. So thank you.
Fantastic. So we have the minutes of the previous meeting. So that's been circulated to us. If not, can I get a proposal that is a true record of the last meeting?
I'm happy to propose, Chair. Yeah, I second that, Chair.
I think we might have lost the chair, Councillor James.
Stacey, can we, if we have lost him, can we try to get him back?
Yes, of course, but bear with us for 2 seconds.
Sorry, can I have a...
Oh, I think are you there, Councillor James?
Yeah. I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yep, thank you. I think we may have a slight technical problem, but hopefully...
Right, can I have a proposal?
I think he's breaking up. Mikey's frozen, I think, on the screen.
Yes, sir. Yes, madam. Councillor James, sorry, can you hear us? Stacey, I think we may have lost him. Can we try to get him back, please?
Of course, he may be restarting or maybe change location, but we'll try. If you just bear with us for a brief adjournment, committee, but please bear with us. In the meantime, Vice Chair, please be prepared to step into your role immediately.
Talk about throwing you in at the deep end.
Ah, there we are.
Oh, there we are.
James is back.
Oh, there we are. Back to you.
I think this device is overheating with this lovely weather that we're having. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. Can I have a proposal for the minutes for the last meeting?
Yeah, I'm happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Price. Seconder?
Yeah, I second it, Chair. Before you disappeared.
Show of hands for all those in favour.
Sorry, Rob, I wasn't
Okay,
in the last meeting. So.
That's fine. They appear to be carried. Okay. So we go on to the next agenda item. So this is skills and talent business case. So if I just hand it over to the presenter.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. I have got a presentation, but I'm not sure because I'm mindful that the majority of you will have seen this presentation. But if you're happy for me to go through it quickly, I'm happy to do so. Shall I carry on?
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
please
I'm just going to share my screen. If you could let me know when you can see it, please.
Yes, we can see it. Thanks.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So good afternoon. My name is Jane Lewis, and I'm leading on the Skills and Talent programme for the City Deal. And firstly, I wanted to just quickly tell you about the Regional Learning and Skills Partnership and who we are and why we're leading on this programme. So we're an independent organisation funded by Welsh Government to identify skills gaps in the region. And we publish an annual employment and skills plan to set out our priority areas, and this is used by Welsh Government to determine where funding for further education and work-based learning should be allocated. We also publish specific reports on skills in the sectors, and an example of this was for the Tidal Lagoon programme a few years ago. And we're leading on the Skills and Talent programme. So what is the programme about and what is our vision? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to harness the skills requirements of the City Deal projects and the wider regional needs. The Skills and Talent programme aims to create new and sustainable opportunities to upskill and create a skills pathway for all that will reduce the number of economically inactive, increase the number of people with higher than level 2 qualifications, and create opportunities to increase the number of people with higher level skills, thereby generating prosperity for individuals and businesses in the region. The 5 key areas will be construction, digital, smart manufacturing, health and well-being, and energy. And although these are the initial 5 that have been identified, there will be opportunities as the programme develops to identify potential new areas. This programme is an integral part of the City Deal portfolio, bringing together the development of skills that will be required by all of the projects within the portfolio and maximising the potential to support the economy. So why do we need a programme? We know from evidence given to us by employers and potential investors in the region that we do not have the skills base here to meet the demands of employers and investors, particularly in digital and engineering sectors. But the issue with skills is far wider in our region. Compared to Wales, we have a higher percentage of people in parts of the region with no qualifications, and some areas in the region have a lower than average number of people qualified below level 2. On the other side, we also have a lower than average level of people qualified at levels 7 to 8 in some parts of the region. The Skills and Talent programme therefore cannot be just about creating more levels 6 to 8, but about bringing opportunities for everybody to get a qualification that will enable them to earn higher salaries. This programme cannot resolve all of the problems in relation to skills individuals, but by working together with stakeholders and employers, we can move further forward, reducing that gap between the people with no skills and the people with higher level skills. So what do we aim to deliver? 14,000 individuals with higher level 2 to 8 of skills in 10 years. 3,000 new apprenticeships between level 3 to degree through the City Deal projects. Develop that all-important career pathway, working with schools and the new curriculum, increasing the number of students taking STEM subjects in college and universities. Deliver 20 new or updated course frameworks that meet industry needs for the future to replace outdated information contained within frameworks. Create at least 2 centres of excellence within specific sectors to develop the region as being the best area for skills development. These won't be bricks and mortar and not one venue, but a cluster of expertise in a given industry sector. Upskilling will be key to ensure that we can deliver the projects that make up the City Deal. And this programme will be about developing those new skills that we don't even know about yet. It will not be about doing more of the same. There will be pilot projects for new skills not delivered here currently and will not duplicate existing provision. We want to create a legacy for the region by developing the right skills, working with schools, colleges, universities and training providers to develop that awareness of what skills requirements will be in the future and how these will change significantly during the lifetime of our pupils who are starting out in school now. So how are we going to deliver this? Initially, we'll undertake a skills gaps analysis. We've already completed an analysis of what's being delivered in the region, and we've been working with projects to identify what skills they anticipate they will need. We'll publish a skills barometer to provide better understanding of these skills and frameworks that need to be changed. We'll develop specialist pilot projects to upskill people early, and these will be bilingually, utilising new ways of learning, and at the same time developing courses for the future, upskilling teachers and lecturers in the new skills. We'll work with schools on the new curriculum, highlighting opportunities that the City Deal will create and the career pathways open to them, particularly if they follow STEM subjects. And we'll identify the opportunities to create those centres of excellence, not duplicating what's already been started, but working together. Our stakeholders, we have a wide range of stakeholders who we have worked with throughout the development of the business case. And these include the City Deal project leads, the 4 colleges and 3 universities operating in our region, the private training providers, local authority education and regeneration departments, school leaders across the region. We've worked with over 300 schools to date to highlight opportunities around the City Deal projects, and the 9 industry sector cluster groups with connections to 2,000 businesses across the region. So what are the risks? The delay in approval will impact, apologies. The delay in approval will impact on the delivery of training. The lack of resources to deliver the programme could result in the skills training not being delivered in time and workforce being brought in from outside the work to work on City Deal projects. The businesses becoming disengaged. Failure to increase the number of skilled individuals. The training providers becoming disengaged and not adapting to the delivery of the necessary skills. And failure to achieve the legacy of sustainable skills in employment. So what about the funding? As you are aware, this is a 30 million total programme with £10 million from the City Deal. And this will be utilised to employ the team of officers over the next 5 years, to identify and fund pilot projects to upskill and train individuals, money to work with schools and develop career pathways, and develop those all-important centres of excellence. There will be £16 million of public match funding, which will be mainly in kind from training providers, from colleges, universities, and we've already had a significant amount of match funding during the development of the business case. There'll be match funding towards the overall cost of the pilot projects developed, and match funding in kind for use of facilities and equipment to deliver training. We'll also have £4 million of private sector investment, and this will be coming from the 3,000 apprentices at level 3 for at least a year, employed through the private sector contractors. So where are we now? I'm glad to inform you that the business case is going through the approval process. All 4 local authorities have now approved the programme. It's been to the Economic Strategy Board, and they've approved the programme. It's been to Programme Board, and it's with you today for consideration. And finally, it will go to the Joint Committee on the 29th of July. The Programme Manager post is being appointed at risk. We had a Gateway Zero review completed at the end of June, and we had a Green Delivery Confidence Assessment indicating that the programme is ready to go. We had a meeting with the Minister, R.T. Davis, and he asked us a number of questions about the programme, and he was very happy with what he heard and a presentation from us. And finally, we will be submitting the programme to the 2 governments, hopefully at the end of July. In relation to the Gateway Zero, there were 4 recommendations, and we have already completed 3 of the recommendations, with the final recommendation around the agreement on how we could streamline some of the governance to optimise, reflecting to the transition of the delivery of the programme, and that we are working with the Portfolio Office to complete that as soon as possible. Thank you very much, councillors, and I'll now unshare my screen. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Jane. Thank you for that presentation. Can I have show of indication on questions? Does anyone have any questions they want to raise from that presentation? Let's start with Councillor Jones, please.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for the presentation, and you know, I applaud the aims. Just a couple of things. You actually said you're independent, but you're actually funded by the Welsh Government. So are they your employers, or
No,
how independent are you?
No, Councillor. Yes, we are funded by them, but we are funded to undertake a piece of work, which actually makes recommendations to them. We are located in the region. We work to the 4 local authorities that make out South West Wales. So each of the 4 local authorities have responsibility over us as the team as it stands. But our main piece of work is to publish that report. There are 4 regional skills partnerships in Wales. We're one of them, and we each publish an annual employment and skills plan. We haven't done so in the last 18 months, obviously because of the pandemic. But our aim is to make sure that Welsh Government understand what the local issues are around skills. So that's how we are independent. We are described by Welsh Government as an independent organisation.
Okay, thanks for that. In your presentation, it actually showed, you know, the universities and so on. In the papers, you actually got RSLP, which I think is the private sector involvement. What sort of involvement have they actually got in this project?
Okay, so the Regional Learning Skills Partnership has 9 cluster groups, so that's industry cluster groups that are led by the industry, and the board of the RLSP is also led by the private sector. So when we are out there gathering the information, whether it be for the Skills and Talent Programme or for the normal Employment and Skills Plan, we are working with over 2,000 businesses in the region to understand what the issues are out there, not just for now, but for the future. So what are the skills that the independent organisations and businesses in this region are identifying that we need to be highlighting to Welsh Government for funding in the future? And for immediate funding, for example, through the personal learning accounts, there's a number of courses that have become available now because of the priority areas that the RLSP has indicated to Welsh Government, and they are then putting funding available to businesses to take that up, and that funding is currently free of charge for businesses.
Okay, Chair, if I can ask, you know, just one more as well. No, we are not the only region, I assume, in the UK actually taking this course of action. So you're actually in a competitive market. You know, what sort of interface have you actually got with, shall we say, like yourselves in other parts of the country, or is there nobody like yourselves?
Yes, when I was putting together the business case for this, I actually worked with 2 other City Deal projects who have got Skills and Talent Programme. So that was Belfast and Edinburgh. And they were very helpful because they'd already started their programme. So they were able to help me identify some of the key areas of that we needed to be covering that I hadn't already identified within the business case. But we also work regularly with the other 3 regional skills partnerships in Wales, and up until April of this year, the skills partnership that I manage also covered Mid Wales. So we had a close working relationship over the border into Shropshire and Herefordshire as well. So we understood what the LEP was doing in the marches as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Curtis.
Yeah, Jane, I just wanted to ask how much of an impact this pandemic is having on your work process or progress, or?
There's been a huge impact on specific sectors, and I would have to mention tourism and hospitality sector. There's a massive impact on that, and we've been working hard with them to try and identify where we could match people who have either lost their jobs or who aren't currently in work or leaving college and university, where they could actually, you know, match up the jobs to people. But it's been very, very difficult for that sector. I've just been on a call this morning with a local company who are desperate for HGV drivers. They can't fill. They've got over 100 posts available. So we're trying to set up a matching service now with them to try, because they're offering the training, they're paying for the training, and logistics is key for survival of businesses in Wales, but it's very, very difficult. And then looking on the other side, where you're looking at new skills around construction, on retrofitting and building smart homes, and the new energy projects down in Pembrokeshire. There's a desperate need for engineers that can look at diverting their training into specialist areas around wind and water and all sorts of new technologies in energy production and smart manufacturing. So the pandemic has impacted so many areas. We're trying to make sure that people have got jobs and people are filling the jobs that we've already got. But at the same time, we need to step up, and this is what I'm hoping this programme will do, is step up the immediate upskilling of workforce to meet the demands that are coming around the corner very, very quickly.
Thank you, Jen. I do understand there's been a shortage of supplies of building materials and stuff and that, so that must be having an impact as well.
Yes, we've got a construction cluster group, and that is one of the key things that they're reporting at the moment, a shortage of supplies, but also severely increased price of supplies because the demand is such that, there's so many projects you're aware of within your own local authorities and all the local authorities across Wales. There's lots of projects going on at the moment and lots of investment. But for that, you need the supplies in order to build these things, and it's not coming. And that's an impact of Brexit as well. We've got a huge wave of things happening at the moment, and skills is a major part of that.
Yeah, I think we've had a double whammy, to be honest with you, between the Brexit and the pandemic. So thank you, Jane. Thanks for your update. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Curtis. Councillor Downing.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a very exciting project, to be honest with you, because new technology is around the corner, and if we're not ready, we'll be left behind. And this is benefiting the whole region. And not only that, we're also picking up grassroots on the way. So this really excites me. And of course, when Jeff was mentioning about the private sector, we need the private sector, because we're talking about 3,000 plus apprentices.
Yes.
So we need the private sector to be on board, and I think this hasn't started, hasn't been funded yet, has it? So the thing is, how then how are we going to measure improvements in this area, and will we have regular feedbacks to this committee?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we will be measuring the impact of this, obviously through the projects that we will be creating. We'll be measuring the impact of those projects and how we will be reporting regularly back to this committee and to the joint committee on how we are developing the programmes and the impact that it's having on young people and people in work wishing to upskill, which will be key, I think, for the immediate, when this programme starts. There's a lot of upskilling that we need to do very, very quickly, but at the same time, bringing through the frameworks that will ensure that qualification is incorporated within future training, whether it be apprenticeships or whether it's college courses, full-time college courses. But the private sector are fully behind this programme. We've worked with them over the last 4 years to develop the concept and the business case, and they're ready to go. They want to make sure that we've got the right apprenticeships in the region, that they are part of this whole development and making this region the best region for upskilling and developing those new important skills in things like energy, digital, smart manufacturing, and obviously health and well-being.
And the other thing, Chair, was I know you're talking to other areas. You mentioned Edinburgh, you mentioned in Ireland. And what it is, if these have got best practice, then that will save us the time as well. You know what they say, if it's not broken, don't fix it, and let's not reinvent the wheel. Things I've never heard before.
I totally agree with you, Councillor.
Councillor Cynghorydd Price, please.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. The first one, obviously, the engagement with the private sector. You mentioned there 2,000 businesses, involved in terms of the assessing of the skills gap and whatnot. Can you just give us a flavour, maybe, in terms of how that engagement took place? What form was it? I'm sure there've been difficulties in the past year, given the circumstances. So I'd be grateful for some clarification, maybe, on how that engagement has taken place. Because obviously 2,000 businesses is a lot of businesses, so how effective is it? And the second point, you mentioned the gateway reviews, the meetings, that there were 4 recommendations made, 3 of which I think have been met fully, you mentioned, and there was still work to be done on the 4th. Can you maybe just elaborate a bit on that 4th recommendation? What were the concerns specifically around governance? Diolch.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Price. Yes, so if I start with the engagement, the way we've engaged with businesses has been through the 9 cluster groups that we have, and we have good representation on those groups, and they meet fairly regularly. We've also undertaken formal meetings where we have specific, so if I talk about engineering and digital, we've held forums that have specifically looked at the issues around those 2 subject areas, where we've invited businesses to come along and tell us about their issues, where they've got skills gaps, what can we do to improve those skills gaps. And we've also done, we regularly do surveys with our businesses to inform the employment and skills plan that we prepare for Welsh Government. But more recently, during the COVID pandemic, we've been presenting Welsh Government with quarterly reports on the impact of COVID in the region, not just on skills, but on the economic impact. So it's been key that we have that industry voice for those reports, because within those reports, we're also making some key recommendations on where we need to put money for upskilling, where potentially staff have had to move into new sectors. If I use tourism, into health and social care as a good example, because they have those transferable skills, but it's been to the benefit of health and social care, but to the detriment of tourism. So now we've got a big drive at the moment, working with all the tourism businesses in the region, including all the tourist associations and tourism forums that have been set up by other bodies, to make sure that we've got the voice of the whole industry, and then we're not talking about the few who may have issues. So that's how we engage with the businesses. In relation to the last recommendation of the gateway review, the exact wording is the SRO of the programme to agree with Portfolio Office how the programme governance can be streamlined and optimised, reflecting the transition to the delivery phase of the programme. When we undertook the gateway review, when we had the feedback back at the end of the review, they were very mindful of the number of steps that we had to go through to get the business case approved, which obviously is how it was set out in the terms for the city deal. But what they wanted to do is make sure that there wasn't any further delay after this project had been approved in how the next phase of the programme was delivered, because they saw this as all councillors have today seen the importance of this programme to the success of the city deal projects and for the economy of the region, and they didn't want to see any further delays in the delivery of the programme moving forward once we'd got over the approval process. That was how they described it to us in the feedback session. I hope that answers your question, Councillor Price. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr.
Cynghorydd Llywelyn.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd, a diolch Jane am y cyflwyniad unwaith eto. I was pleased to support this proposal when it came for approval before Neath Talbot Council in terms of signing up for the business plan. And I just like to very briefly follow the questions by Councillor Phil Downing and Councillor Darren Price. We know from experience that sometimes projects which have predictions or projections of various numbers of jobs created or jobs sustained don't always meet those expectations, or are not always meeting those expectations in a very convincing way. So I was pleased to hear the response that both the main City Deal committee and ourselves as a scrutiny committee will be receiving regular updates on the project. But I'm wondering whether the stakeholders that have already been mentioned in part of developing or working up the project or working up the bid will also be involved closely in that review process, including perhaps being available to meet with us as time goes on, so that we can speak with them directly about what their experiences have been of being part of this project as it progresses and as the outcomes are gradually met at various key milestones. I think we'd probably like over a period of time to hear directly from the experience of those that are at the sharp end of utilising the project.
Diolch I chi, Councillor Llewellyn. Yes, we have set up underneath the RLSP board a skills solution group, and on that group we'll have a representative of all of the projects, the chairs of all of the cluster groups for the specific 5 clusters that we've already spoken about in my presentation. We'll have the further education, higher education and training providers, DWP and Careers Wales and education sitting around that table. So if I could suggest that possibly that would be the group, because they will be the ones that will be measuring the impact and making sure that we're going in the right direction as far as the development of new skills in the region is going to be.
Diolch.
Diolch yn fawr i chi.
Councillor Barron.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I'd like to explore a little bit more detail about the engagement with the private sector. You've given some answers of how you have engaged with 2,000 private sector companies, but I'm wondering to what extent you've engaged with SMEs in the region. And in particular, have you gone through organizations like the Federation of Small Businesses, IPSI, and others to ensure that we can establish a local supply chain with SMEs playing a full part and ensuring that employment is actually grown inside West Wales, as opposed to a lot of leakage into other areas. So if you could expand a little bit more on how you see your programs benefiting the SME sector and their ability to contribute to the supply chain.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barron. Yes, we have engaged with FSB, with the Chambers of Commerce. We haven't done IPSI, but it will be on the list now. We recognise that SMEs make up the majority of the employers in our region, and we are very conscious that we have to have their voice, but they don't always have the time to attend meetings, and this is why I wanted to emphasise that a lot of the engagement that we have, yes, is face-to-face as much as we can, but we have to make sure that we have that SME voice, and this is why we utilise online surveys and encourage them to have their voice and have their say in recommendations that we are making in our normal day-to-day work, but now more importantly in this skills and talent programme moving forward. I sit on a number of other groups that sit outside the RLSP, like the energy group in Pembrokeshire, where they have a lot of the SMEs sitting around the table, and we have that voice of that sector. The construction sector, again, there's a whole range of SME businesses out there, and we have to have their voice around what the skills of the future are and how we can help them ensure that their workforce is upskilled as much as the big construction companies that we have in our region. And if I'm honest, that my passion for this programme is about making sure that the people in our region get jobs and not bring in people to do the jobs that we will be creating through these programmes and projects that make up the City Deal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Barron. Does anyone else have any questions for Jane? I can't see any indications of it. So thank you very much, Jane, for that presentation. Really appreciate that. If we can move on to the next.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Jane. If we can move on to the next agenda item, I believe that Jonathan is going to be taking this. I'll be stepping out the chair for this agenda item and Saif will be stepping in. So on to you, Jonathan. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Phil Ryder's with us today. He's the PMO manager, so he's going to cover agenda items 7 up to 10. But Chair, if you're willing, I need to leave at 3 because I got to be part of a gateway review for the portfolio at 3. So could I bring the internal audit forward so I can cover that, and then we can go on to Phil's sections? Then would that be okay, Chair?
I'm happy for that. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So you've all received the audit report. So we call it an internal audit, but effectively it's a regional audit of the Swansea-based City Deal. It's conducted by Pembrokeshire Council. So Justin Blewett was the person that we were assigned. We worked with Justin for the best part of just over a month and a half. 5 recommendations came out of that review, and we got an assurance rating of what they call substantial. And it doesn't sound great, but from an audit perspective, it's very good. So it's a green status, and just to define it, there's no or few weaknesses in the adequacy or effectiveness of governance, internal control, risk management, and financial management arrangements. So basically, we've improved, but we can always improve more. So the 5 recommendations that we're currently putting forward and implementing are: the first one is around formal agreements. So we have a joint committee agreement, a thing called a JCA. The 4 local authorities are signed up to it, but what's not in there is the university's commitment and health board commitment. So what we're going to do as part of the joint committee agreement updates, which we're going through right now, we're going to have a kind of extra note in there that the universities and health board sign up to make sure that they are committed to the City Deal. We have no reason to believe they're not. This is just a formality than anything else. So that will happen probably within the next couple of months. Number 2 was around anti-fraud and anti-corruption strategy. So a colleague of mine was on the call, so Richard Arnold, he's been supporting this. It's basically finalised. We have it in place. We just haven't put it through our governance. So in September, October, we'll get it through our programme board and joint committee. Number 3 was around risk scoring. So it basically is what was the residual risk score. That has now been encompassed in the portfolio risk register and cascaded onto all projects and programmes. So that's complete. Number 4, as it happens, Phil will cover that on the agenda today, and it was actually mentioned earlier on. This is about capturing and reporting on achievement of outputs, outcomes and impact, to make sure that the performance targets and there's evidence around what we set out to do, both at project, programme and at portfolio level, and showing that we add value. So part of that will also include community benefits. And then the final one then is around the private sector funding. So this on our risk register at portfolio level is a red risk. We have approximately £600 million that we need to bring in. So what we need to make sure is that everything is in place and the risk is mitigated to make sure that we're monitoring and bringing in that private sector funding over the next, I would say 5 to 10 years, creeping into the 15 for the portfolio. So those are the 5 areas. They were all on our radar anyway. We had started working on them, but from an internal audit perspective, I was very happy, and it's reflective of where we are. And we've got work to do, but we're in a good place. Chair, so from my perspective, that's the update. If anybody's got any questions based on those 5 recommendations or anything else.
Okay, I believe I'll be taking over now, Chair. So, right, I have Sharon Frigard, Jeff Jones, and Tony Barron. Tony, I'm not too sure if this is a previous hands that already indicated, or is it a new indication?
It is a previous hand. Apologies.
No problem. That's fine. So can I first go to Sharon, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, Vice Chair. I was just wondering, in terms of the governance, if it's a mere formality with the health board signing up, why is it going to take a couple of months to get the formal written agreement? Surely, as the deadline for this was the 30th of June, there are measures in place. And really, with all the recommendations, given that we're a scrutiny committee, I wonder, is there going to be a date, a timeline by which this comes back to this committee so that we can check that those recommendations have been completed and all signed off?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Councillor. Right, let me make sure I cover all aspects. So the deadline was set at June because the funding, the joint committee agreement was planned to be updated by then, and it's part of that wider joint committee agreement that we're updating. That unfortunately isn't a 2-minute job. We've got all the suggested amendments for the JCA. That additional letter will be part of that process to get it through governance. And what we have to do for governance, Councillor, we have to take it to our programme board, and then we have to take it to joint committee, and programme board provide recommendations to joint committee based on that. So that's why it's going to take that extra 2 months to do that.
Okay, and can you give us a date by which that is going to come back to this committee so that we can sort of tick that off?
So we report on these on a quarterly basis. So Phil, you're on the call. Remind me, when is the next quarter in September for the reports?
Yeah, that's correct. On the next quarter is in September for the reports. Whether or not the JCA will be fully agreed and the deed of variation complete by then is another question, because as John explained, there is quite a significant timeline with regards to the deed of variation for this joint committee agreement update. But what we've done working with colleagues in Swansea is that we've now agreed a way forward so that future amendments to the JCA, unless they're fundamentally changing the JCA, can be done without the need for a deed of variation. So any future amendments, once we get this one pushed through, the clauses will be updated sufficiently so that they can be done in a matter of weeks as opposed to months. But it was an issue with the original way that the JCA was set up, that it had to go back through this process in order to achieve the sign off and the approval of the respective councils to make it legally binding.
But it will come back to this committee so that we can see that it's been completed and agreed in full.
There will be an update in September, and if it hasn't been completed for whatever reason by September, given that the timings for the next joint committees, etc., because of school holidays and things, then we will give a firm date of when those will be completed in September.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor.
Okay, Shara, any supplementary question, or you're happy for me to move to next member?
No, obviously there'll be an update on the recommendation per se, I would say, coming back to the committee so that we will have another opportunity to just make sure that they are ticked off as it's part of the governance and financial management.
And Councillor, can I add as well that with Pembrokeshire Council, we use an online system, and any deadlines that we set and any updates, we have to adhere to those. So we have to update the system. You won't see that necessarily as a group, but we will report on those, as I said, quarterly for scrutiny and for programme board joint committee as well. So all governance groups will get those updates. And if any time slips or if there are outstanding actions, we will.
Sorry, I think you missed my point there. I know that you get the updates with the timelines, but we need to complete and have the successful outcome of what the recommendation is within that timeline.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, I have Councillor Jeff Jones, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question revolves around the financial management side of the audit report. Yeah, the first part, you know, they've released monies. I think it's 54 million now that's actually come into the, if we can call it the banking Carmarthen. No, there's been a delay in releasing the monies out to the various regions. Why is that still a problem? And with regards to releasing the money, I understand I can only speak from Swansea's point of view. The money may be released not over 15 years, but over a shorter timeline. Is that right or wrong?
Councillor, if I start that, and Rich, I'll hand over to you for the details. So, Councillor, we got a thing called a control mechanism called funding agreements. And basically the funding agreements are agreements between the accountable body, which is Carmarthenshire Council, the lead local authority, that's one, and then we have a secondary agreement from the lead local authority to whoever's delivering. So it could be university, health board, it could be the local authority itself. And those funding agreements have to be in place before the money flows, because that's making sure that we hold people to account, all the different organisations involved in terms of output deliverables, outcomes, impact, etc. So that's the control mechanism we have in place. In some instances, that's taken a little longer than what we hoped to get those funding agreements in place. But Rich, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, we are in a good place with that, and the money is flowing as we planned, and money is getting out now to the local authorities and to the lead deliverers. And Rich, I'll leave a second part to you in terms of the drawdown of funds from UK government. But are you happy to confirm what I just said, Rich, just to make sure?
Yes, yeah, John, you're very right. There was a lot of legal conversation and a lot of legal matters that had to be dealt with. So there was an initial delay in signing these funding agreements. But once the funding agreements are signed with the respective authorities and projects, all that does is allow me to release the funds from the accountable body based on a claim form, which is based on spend in arrears. So now the claim form, once the claim forms are signed, there's actually no delay in releasing the funds, because once the money's been spent, the funding agreements stipulate that authorities can claim for spend in arrears on a quarterly basis.
Okay.
So from Swansea's perspective, I think theirs was signed in March and the money was released by the end of last financial year. Now, from Swansea's perspective, I can't release any furthermore because in that particular instance, the project spent a lot at risk. I could release the full 3 years worth of allocation to Swansea, and I'm now waiting on, and we're in constant dialogue with both governments, that the minute that this year's annual grant award is released to us, then once Swansea complete the claim form, I'll release the money straight away. It'll be in a matter of weeks.
Okay, thanks for that.
No delay.
So with regards to the timeline, you know, I think the original agreement was that the money would be released over 15 years. So that's still the case then?
Well, it's got somewhat convoluted now, because what UK government, which have done, which is really helpful to the region, is the way in which the City Deal grant is made up is that UK government are providing £115.6 million, and Welsh government are providing £125.4 million, and that's the total of the 241 million. So what UK government have said is that they've paid us their usual allocation for the last 3 years, but they are now going to front load their grant over 10 years. So essentially they're going to pay the next 11 years over 7 to front load the money. The challenge in that we're in dialogue, and both governments have been in dialogue with each other, because at the moment Welsh government haven't matched that profile. So when we refer to it, and I refer to it over 15 years, the reason being is Welsh government is still over 15 years, or their proportion, but UK government is over 10 years. But we're just waiting for both governments to confirm it, and we're looking to see if Welsh government will indeed match UK government, which again would be even further beneficial. But it is worth noting that Welsh government have they have agreed to front load us additional money in the first 10 years. So they have moved, they have front loaded. We would just like, there's just ongoing conversation to see if they would match the 10 years.
Okay. Councillor, it's worth noting as well. So Rich is working with Chris Moore and the other Section 151 officers to look at the scenarios of what does that mean for us. And effectively, it means we don't have to borrow as much. So we won't spend as much in terms of borrowing. So that's a good thing for the region. We just don't know how much that will be until everything's settled and we know what the figures are.
Yeah, okay. Right, you know, the second part, as you said, you know, the audit issue of a substantial to me means there's big problems, but a substantial is the exact opposite. It's really the, shall we say, the shortfall investment by the private sector, only 16 million of the 592 million. And you mentioned projects over 15 years as well, you know, to actually get completed. But you've got a comment here that actually says, though 534 million is recorded as being an advanced engagement. What exactly do you actually mean by that? Are they going to commit shortly or what?
So this is part of our portfolio business case. And again, Rich, you'll jump in at some point here, I'm sure. But what we try to do is status record everything that we have in terms of business engagement and the commitments from businesses. So what you'll find is that certain business cases have upfront private sector investment. So for example, Pembroke Dock Marine. Others would have it through, it could be through R&D, it could be through tenancy, it could be through procurement, a whole host of the supply chain. There's a whole host of different mechanisms, if you like, that they bring in that money, that 600 million or thereabouts. And what we did with every project, and Rich did this, he went through with every project looking at all the different funding streams and where they made assumptions or they have evidence based around that inward investment and categorized them in that portfolio business case. And Rich now regularly monitors that with the projects on a quarterly basis to make sure that we're on track for bringing in that private sector funds. But some of it may not, Councillor, it may not come in till years 5 or 6 or whatever it might be in the project, depending what type of project it is. But Rich, you can add to that. I'm sure there's other stuff there that you can cover.
Yeah, there's nothing much more to add to it, but it's just essentially the categorization of it. And a lot of these projects, especially if there's construction involved, they're not going to essentially leverage the private sector until they've been sort of built. Yeah. So it's quite subjective, and it's quite, you know, what people want to see is formal commitment right now, signing on the dotted line. Well, a lot of these projects are not geared up for that. They're geared up to be delivered, which will be the catalyst to leverage the private sector. So it's very project dependent, but at the moment there is ongoing discussions, and there's some close to being finalised, and that will materialise. Certainly will over the next 18 months, but furthermore over the course of the city deal.
Yeah, you know, I fully understand. You say you seem to highlight the homes as power stations, perhaps as a shortfall there, but they actually say, but this is still a significant risk area, so they don't seem to take that into account. Why is it such a significant risk area?
So for me, there's uncertainty, there's assumptions based on economic appraisals and various other things. But homes as power stations, for the inward investment for private sector, is the lion's share of what we got across the portfolio. It's a big number. Yeah. But Councillor, for my argument would be, and we have talked lots to both governments about this, if we are successful in homes as power stations and we have this blueprint and we test it through the 10,300 homes that we're talking about, and companies start anchoring or growing in the region, a company alone could bring in hundreds of millions of pounds worth of economic generation for the region, right? So what we need to do is make sure that we don't put all our eggs in one basket and we spread that through a supply chain, and that is the aim, or the outcome, if you like, of that investment. The 15 million of grant that we get from City Deal, it has huge potential to accelerate that, and there are funds in there to help support supply chain developments. We will work with Industry Wales, we'll work with companies already residing within the region. So there's a whole host of things, and with the governments around policy setting as well. So both UK and Welsh government are very keen on this because of potentially the policy that it could set, not only for rental accommodation and but also private accommodation as well.
Okay. Sorry, Chair. Can I just ask one question as well, actually, to go on there? If the private investment doesn't come into being, we don't actually get it, how are we going to make that shortfall up?
That's a killer question. So every local authority and every lead deliverer has committed to bringing in those funds and delivering the outputs and outcomes that they have. There are contingencies within each project, but when you're talking about a magnitude of hundreds of millions of pounds of supply chain, that would mean that the project failed if it didn't materialize. Right, but we're going to do everything we can, and I believe that we can do that for all of our projects where we can bring in the private sector funding. Things will change, and Phil will kindly share with you later about change control on making sure that anything that we change in our projects doesn't miss the point of what we're trying to achieve in terms of jobs, GVA, inward investment, etc. So we still keep our eyes on the targets of what we're trying to achieve. How we get there could adapt. For things out of our control or within our control, but we will adapt. I've got no doubt about that across the portfolio. But we will put mitigations in place to minimise any shortfall of funding. But ultimately, it's down to the local. This is why we have these control procedures in place, like funding agreements, so that local authorities and lead deliverers are held to account for bringing in that funding, jobs, etc.
Thank you.
Okay, next on my list is Councillor Morgan, please.
Lovely, thank you, Sir Vice Chair. Jonathan, it won't be a surprise for me to talk about outcomes because, as you say, the audit report was satisfactory, but the recommendation for performance monitoring and delivery of outcomes has come out as critical.
Yeah.
And it talks, I mean, we've talked about this before in terms of measuring outputs, because there's 10,000 jobs potentially to be created. And in terms of the audit, you've mentioned that Aragon is the only project that can be measured at the minute. But yet, if I flick to the annual report, and I know you're going to go before that, the only reference I can find to employment is the target, which is, it says construction phase additional employment, 65 FTEs defined for phase 1 only, and the outcome is then estimated at 99.4 person years. I've got no idea what that means really, because it's a change in terminology there. But for everything that's begun and what's gone before today, is it only 65 jobs that we're currently officially at?
There are more. There was an actual article, I think, in the Wales Online in relation to Swansea Council as well, because obviously the arena's been built or near to being built, and there are construction jobs associated with that as well. But this is part of the problem, and this is about managing expectations. When you've got infrastructure that could take years to build, the jobs that you create during the build are still claimable, if you like, and part of that mix. But it's once the things are operational and then the stuff around them happen, that's where you start seeing the more outcome impact related things. So the headline jobs figure is relating to that longer term outcome and impact of the infrastructure. But with Aragon, the reason why the person days or years is just by nature of how they employ through construction. So they don't employ an FTE for a year. They might employ 15 FTEs for 3 weeks. So you have to have a common denominator to be able to articulate it. So it doesn't quite fit in terms of FTEs in that sense. But what we should find is, as soon as things start becoming operational, and that has happened with Aragon as well, there are other numbers in Aragon. We should start seeing those kind of profiles of what we had by timeline, and that's what you will start receiving. It won't be this quarter, it will be the quarter after, but we will start having what we call benefit profile. Phil will cover all this in a few minutes, but you will have benefit profiles. This is what we said we would do. Then you would have the benefit registers with a timeline to say when and how will all the outputs and outcomes, including jobs, including GVA, when those will start coming in. And what you'll find is that we have to manage expectations, as I said, because we may not get those larger numbers until year 4, 5, 6, etc. But we will monitor those and we will profile them so that people can see when and how and are we achieving our targets. So it is a bit slightly premature. Sorry, somebody was going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in as well there, John, before we went on to something else. Sorry, Councillor. With regards to the numbers you just quoted as well, that was from the case study specifically for Eregin. So it was a case study element for the annual report. There is the wider jobs reported further up in the report. But as and when the schemes go into operation, that's when we intended to put a case study around the benefits that have been delivered in the public facing documentation. Obviously, we will report much more frequently back to the respective governance committees, but that was because Eregin phase 1 was completed and in operation. That was the purpose of the case study specifically for Eregin in the annual report.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I just reiterate that it is critical that we get that information.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to leave because I'm almost late for the other meeting that I got to go to. But Phil will cover benefits realization and if you like the journey that we're going on. But from my perspective, what you'll find is that all the business cases coming through the pipeline right now have benefits registers and everything else. So they are current and wherever else. Some of the ones that went through quite some time ago, we have to bring those up to the same sort of standard so we can look across the portfolio and profile all of the stuff that people have said probably best part of 2 years ago when the business case was written. So it's just getting everybody on that kind of even keel and then start reporting those through quarterly monitoring.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Sharon, please.
Yeah, just to come back on Jeff's last point about the private sector monies. I know this is obviously a different situation now, given that lots of costs have changed. But I just want to clarify that there's no binding legal commitment with penalties on any of the private sector at the moment who've committed to certain projects. That's one point. And the other point is obviously you were talking, Jonathan, about the business cases, all the projected monies that we assumed went into a certain project. If in terms of construction, for example, they've almost tripled and quadrupled in some cases. So there's going to be extra funds needed. So are all those things being looked at? Because, you know, it's almost a completely new dynamic.
Yeah, so yes, to answer the last part of the question, yes, they are. So again, business cases that were written some time ago, those are being reviewed to make sure that they're still fit for purpose and costs and solutions and all those different things. And they will go through that change control process that Phil will outline. Phil can give an example of that with one of the projects in Swansea later, but costs have increased. But what you find is that with these, when you make assumptions and evidence based on plans, you know, there's always a contingency around what projects put in for construction. So of the ones that are coming through the pipeline in more recent times, we're not necessarily finding that there's a significant cost increase. And ultimately, if there is, that would you would either change the scope of what you're delivering, or the lead authority or lead deliverer would absorb that funding or look for alternative sources of funding to maintain what they plan to deliver in size or quality or whatever it might be. But that's quite common practice with all the infrastructure projects. So there are contingencies within the numbers that they put in, and they are reviewing them regularly. And until you go to procurement and it becomes a full business case, you won't know those answers. So Pentra Owl is a case in point that is out for procurement right now. We will know very shortly whether or not that fits within the envelope that they put forward. But bearing in mind that business case was only approved probably best part of 6 months or 8 months ago. So the numbers should be pretty close. Acknowledging that cost of wood and metal and brick and unavailability, that has caused issues. And that's on every risk register or issues log in that sense. Councillor, your first part of the question, remind me what...
Whether or not we've got any legally binding penalty clauses that we have with the private sector who've committed?
Yeah, so it depends. So we don't even know if we get any financial. Every procurement goes through a process, will have a contract. So those contracts, but again, you know, what you tend to find, and Phil has more experience in this from his history and stuff, but you generally work with a contractor. So if there's a shortage of concrete or goes up by a certain amount, you negotiate with that contractor to make sure that your project's successful. So in terms of penalty clauses, yes, they probably will be in there, but it's how the local authority or lead deliverer will enact those penalty clauses, because they still want to deliver.
Just jump in there and say, when Richard said, well, if the private sector may not, although they've committed, they may not actually come in until 2 or 3 or 4 years' time, does that still stand, what you're saying?
Yeah, that would still, yeah. So the only, go on, Rich.
Sorry to interrupt.
Go on, please, Rich.
Yeah, I see. I can see where you're coming from, Councillor Freegard. What at this moment in time, we wouldn't bind them now for a delivery in 4 years. What you're finding is when the private sector come on board, they will be bound at that point with their key deliverables when they initiate the delivery of the project, either on their own or with local authorities or stakeholders. So the ones that have come on board now, yes, there is a legally binding contract in place for them. And yes, there is penalties in the form of potential clawback on the grant. And we've had to put that in to protect the city deal and the authorities themselves. So and that's one of the reasons when I took a question earlier on about the timing on the funding agreements. The funding agreements that are used in these, because we've got 2 templates in process. There was a lot of to-in and throw-in, and even with private sector partners on board, there was a lot of back and forth to make sure we get it right and to make sure that the appropriate risk is passed on to the private sector partners, and they're accountable.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Chair, I'm going to have to leave. I'm late for the other meeting, but Rich and Phil can cover all the other agenda items, and if anything, I can pick up after the meeting then.
That's great. Thank you, Jonathan.
Are
there any further indication from members? Okay, I don't see none. So we go back to item number 7 on the agenda, which is Swansea Bay City Deal Change Control Procedure. This sounds like a technical report. Alison, who's taking this report?
I believe Phil Ryder will be taking this one, Chair.
Okay, over to you, Phil.
Thank you. I am, Chair. It is quite a technical document. So what I'll do is I'll pull up the flow chart that's been devised alongside it and walk you through the flow chart. And then if there's any specific queries, anyone can obviously ask those once I've spoken through the procedure using the flow chart. So if I just share my screen. Yes. Okay, so if someone can just let me know when you can actually see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, lovely. Is it legible, or do you need me to make it a little bit bigger?
It's bigger if it's possible, sir.
Is that any better?
Not really, no.
Or maybe it's a little bit slow. I have increased it quite a lot.
Yeah, that's better.
There we are. Great. Okay, so just quickly before I start going through the actual process, it is worth noting that the majority of change will be approved at a project level. What we've devised this procedure for and this policy for is the reporting of change, so that we can obviously report back to our various governance committees and boards, and also change management where there is a need for escalation and intervention through the governance channels applicable to the city deal. So essentially the project will identify a change or issue. They will issue to the portfolio office a change identification notice, essentially just saying we've got this issue, we need to enact this change. This is what we're proposing in doing about it. That'll then be reviewed, and a decision that the change is the changes essential will be made. If at any point the decision to proceed, or the decision is that the change isn't actually warranted, then we would look to go to a risk reduction meeting, a risk mitigation meeting with the respective programme or project, to look at all of the options available to them to resolve the issue that the change is actually affecting. Once a decision to proceed is agreed, then the risk/issue/change is registered on the respective log. We've added an option for a change advisory board. So if there's a need to bring in specialist stakeholders, specialist advisors, economic strategy board, if it's an economic change that we need to review and make a decision on, that we can hold a change advisory board to support the strategy behind the change. And that's an optional board for the change request based on the level of the change. Whether it's agreed that a change advisory board is required or not is slightly academic to the actual process. Once a decision to enact the change has then been confirmed, whether or not a board has been held, we then, if it needs escalation, the project is free to enact the change and to implement their solution. They will then obviously be expected to update their risk registers and logs accordingly once the solution has been implemented, and to report back any further reporting that's required with regards to the specific change. If we deem that the change is substantial, and we're working on thresholds currently, so we've put the procedure in place because we needed a procedure to manage change, but currently we've based the thresholds on the actual type of change. But what we are looking to do is to put metric thresholds against the change, so that various levels of approval can be given to various levels of change, essentially. If it's a change that needs to be escalated through the governance process, then a resolution meeting will be held, and all of the supporting evidence documentation will be created and collated at that time. This will then go to programme board, and this is one of the amendments that we're looking at for the joint committee agreement, is to give programme portfolio board an element of decision-making capacity for operational change. Incidentally, that was one of the recommendations that came out of last year's Gateway review, and that is part of the joint committee agreement updates that are also currently progressing. At this point in time, though, the programme board will give a recommendation to proceed with the change, and then that change request can then move on to joint committee. Joint committee have the authority then to approve a change request. The only time, if you look at the change procedure where joint committee can't approve the proposed resolution, is if it's going to impact the wider portfolio level benefits, which is GVA, jobs created, or the overall investment proposed. Obviously, the things we've spoken about earlier, the jobs and the private sector funding, that's all, as far as this is concerned, would be a change. So any variance from what's been committed to in the business cases would then also need to be ratified by Welsh UK government. If it doesn't impact on any other portfolio-wide benefits, then it can be approved by the joint committee. And similarly to the a change that's approved and implemented at a programme or project level, that can then be implemented, and the appropriate registers, etc., will be updated accordingly once the implementation has taken place. You will notice there, just before I wrap up on this element, that there is a loop there, so that because if it needs escalation, there might be more considerations and more stakeholders that need involvement. There is a loop within this process that if the resolution is deemed unacceptable, we can review, amend, and resubmit the resolution back through the governance processes if at any time that it is deemed that there might be a better solution, or that the solution proposed is not the most viable solution for the resolution of the specific issue. So that's a very, very quick overview of the flow through the procedure. I'll just stop sharing my screen there, and I'll hand it back to you, Chair, for any comments or questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ryder, for your presentation. Before I open up for questions, I can see the chair is back. So at this point, I will hand the chair's position over to Councillor Rob James. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for that presentation, Phil. Any questions on this that anyone has? One of the questions that came to mind before I bring in the others then is that you mentioned we would have to look at whether it impact the rest of the portfolio, the change does, but isn't the nature of the city deal in such a way that everything really impacts the rest of the projects? Even the small changes really do?
Sorry, Chair. It's not if it's going to impact the outcomes. It's the spending objectives of the portfolio. So what we've agreed is the 9,000 plus jobs, the 1.8 billion GVA, and the 1.3 or 1.25 billion of investment. It's if there's going to be any impact on those headline figures, it would need to go through Welsh UK Gov. If it's going to impact on anything else, it can then be approved regionally by the joint committee, and that's where I did mention we need to set the threshold so that it's not just deemed a kind of a substantial change, because I don't think you were here when John referred to it earlier.
Some examples then, Phil.
I was just going on to it. So there's currently a change request in for the innovation matrix as part of the Swansea waterfront development. It was the box village.
Yeah.
Now, essentially, I can't go into too much detail because it hasn't gone to joint committee yet, and obviously we're in a public forum. But essentially, there's a financial reprofile. There's no additional spend required on the actual project. It's being done for the financial envelope that has been agreed as part of the business case. But what we are looking to do is we're looking to essentially spend slightly more money on one part, slightly less money on another part, but we know the jobs are going to remain the same. The GVA will remain the same or be improved, and the investment is the same. But because it is a financial reprofile, we've put a change request through to essentially ensure that it's the best result and providing maximum outcome for the project, and that's why at this point in time we have worked with the leads that they will advise us of all change, so that we can support them in making a decision until we've got those thresholds agreed as to whether or not this does need to be approved by the region. So you're quite right, some of the small changes could have an impact on the wider portfolio, but as the heads of terms covers those three specific spending objectives, that's why that has been the kind of line in the sand, if you like, for the full escalation of any change requests.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's just, for me, it seems when we have gone through this in the past, say you take that project that you've just mentioned, and aspect one of it would create 500 jobs, and aspect two would create 200 jobs. And reprofiling it, incidentally, they still create 700 jobs. Sometimes these numbers feel as if they kind of picked out of the air somehow. And surely reprofiling would change the job creation by even one or two, because it's hard to get that block like for like kind of situation when you are reprofiling. So I don't know, are we going for simplicity's sake when it comes to looking at these things, or are we really drilling down on the numbers? And
No, we are drilling down on the numbers because this goes hand in glove with, and I know it's one of the next agenda items. This goes hand in glove with the benefits realisation reporting. And you're absolutely right. There might be a total number of 700 jobs, and we might end up delivering 702 or 698. You're absolutely spot on. But at the point in time of a change request, because it's so early on in the delivery, we couldn't necessarily determine that level of change to those jobs, but we would obviously report that as soon as that level of benefit change became apparent. But what we would do is, obviously, if we reprofile, let's say taking this example, and there was a negative 2 jobs, we would report that back as a benefit change as opposed to a project change request, because we've separated them out so that we can report on the benefits change much more readily, as and when they are realised and as and when they are delivered, in order that we can still progress in a timely manner without having a detrimental impact to the delivery of the programme. And there's a very good reason for that. If you take the GVA for argument's sake, a slight delay in GVA of say 6 months, it might seem a slight delay over a 15-year portfolio, but when we're talking about projects and programs contributing maybe tens of millions of pounds in GVA per year, 6 months is obviously a substantial figure, which is why we would obviously look to progress the project sooner than be able to determine that we might end up losing 2 jobs or gaining 2 jobs, but it would be far more beneficial to the region to ensure that, say, the GVA was in place sooner than potentially knowing exactly the benefit impact at that point in time.
I guess, like you said, it's a balancing act between being proactive and also, with any projects, there's risks attached to them, and I guess it's just the management of that risk afterwards, and we're all accountable after the fact, I guess. So I guess like you said, it's a balancing act between speed and a measured approach. Okay, Councillor Jones, did you indicate that you wanted to come in?
Where I was going to, but you actually touched on the point. But Phil has actually raised something. I need clarification. You seem to be fixed on this 1.8 billion, 9,000 jobs and so on. Anybody that actually, surely that's an estimate at the end of the day. I know it's a figure for you to actually aim for.
Yeah.
But I don't think, if I was going to bet, I certainly wouldn't bet that you'd end up with those figures at the end of the day. So what sort of flexibility are we actually talking about?
No, you're absolutely right, Councillor. And they are estimates. The way all of the legal documentation is written, that it is best endeavours to deliver on those headline figures, but what we are working closely with the individual programs and projects on is to ensure that we exceed those figures. They were, if you like, the baseline is the wrong term, but if you like, they were our baseline benefits for delivery, and on the assumption that we can deliver what we have set out to deliver within the confines of the programs and the projects, then they should all hopefully be exceeded, with the exception too much of the actual investment, because obviously we don't want to see too much more than the headline figure of investment going, because it means we're spending more than what we said we were going to spend to deliver the other benefits. But absolutely, you're right. They are in my simple terms baseline figures that we will aim for. I think off the top of my head, Rich, the joint committee agreement has a percentage variance of 10%. So that should likely be 10% plus or minus. I think it can be, but we are obviously working to the plus 10% as our target.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions to raise on this matter? I can't see any members indicating, so thank you very much for that. Phil, are you taking us on the next one as well?
I am, Chair. Could you just remind me what's next on the agenda? Sorry, I haven't got it open on my screen. I've got the other things in the background.
Might be item number 8, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, so it's benefits realisation and benefits profiles.
Okay, absolutely. I shall share my screen again. 2 seconds, apologies. I'll just minimize that. So what I'll do, I know you've had a copy of the templates, but if I pull up a completed template and just show you where we're at with this. So if someone can just indicate when you can actually see the template on screen.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, lovely. So what I'm showing you, you've seen a draft template. I'm showing you a completed template now for jobs at Eregan. Where we're at with the benefits realization, and I'm conscious that this is extremely important, not just to the portfolio, but to the governance groups and committees that obviously we work closely with. We have, as a portfolio office, we have drafted all of the templates for the portfolio level benefits, which is the GVA, the jobs and the investment. These have all been sent to the respective program and project leads and SROs for their agreement and sign off of those portfolio level benefits, and they will be included within the September quarterly report. We agreed previously the quarterly is probably an appropriate reporting timeline for benefits, because obviously they may change fairly slowly given the time it can take through delivery and through getting things quantified and measured, etc. So we will report on those quarterly and provide an annual report on the benefits that have been delivered within that 12-month period. As I said, we've now completed the templates for the portfolio level. We're working through the individual program and project level benefits, so things like floor area to be created, health benefits that are being created on the health schemes, things like the impact to properties with regards to the digital scheme, and all of the individualized program and project benefits, if you like, above and beyond the GVA jobs and investment. But if I just take you through a completed template very quickly, it'll tell you what the description of the benefit is, what the objective of the benefit is. It'll provide a little bit of detail of what wider benefits this particular benefit impact. So in the case of jobs created, it'll have an increase in GVA, reduction in unemployment, better prospects for younger residents, economic growth, etc., etc. It highlights who the benefit owner is. It gives us a committed target, a timeline for delivery, a current target. So this, Chair, is where, if for argument's sake we committed to 427 jobs in this instance and it was now 425, that is where we would highlight that. And if it was a significant change, plus or minus to the number of jobs, then in line with the written change procedure, that would have gone through the regional approval. So let's say we're now talking, I don't know, let's just take a 10% threshold at the minute. We haven't actually agreed the thresholds, but if we were saying that we were now 42 jobs down, that would have gone through the region to either approve the change if there was a genuine reason for that, or to come up with a mitigation strategy in order to ensure that those jobs were still delivered, and a strategy to ensure that the programs and projects knew how they were going to reobtain, if you like, those jobs that were potentially on the reduced target. We've then got an actual benefit of the jobs created so far. So in the example of Eregin, phase 1, there was 65 full-time equivalent construction jobs created. And I'm not sure if you were there for the conversation around full-time equivalents. Because of the nature of construction, that individuals work on a contract basis, and they may only be actually on site for 12 weeks, and they move on to the next site, to the next site, to the next site. There's an accumulation of weeks worked making up a full-time equivalent there, which is the only metric really how we can accurately determine the construction jobs. So what that is saying is that there was 65 staff members for a duration of a year, essentially, created through the delivery of this construction. And then there's 102 of 148 operational jobs created thus far in Eregin. But obviously you will note there that 102 of 148 in phase 1, sorry, I should say, that the end date for this delivery is the end of the portfolio. 15 years essentially. So we're hoping that void of 46 jobs now will obviously slowly accumulate over the next 10 years to give us 148 of 148 when we get to 2032. And then we go down to just a little bit around the frequency of reporting, any risks associated with the actual delivery of these individual specific benefits, and then any dependencies. So for argument's sake, we had a briefing earlier from the skills. Obviously some of these projects will be heavily reliant on that project or program to deliver a skilled workforce for the respective schemes. And that is, again, I'll stop sharing there, Chen, and hand that back to you. That's an overview of where we are with the reporting and the collating of the benefits realisation and benefits target measurement as outlined within the respective business cases.
On the 46 job vacancy in phase 1 at the moment, at what stage do you, on the realisation of this, do you start panicking that is under the threshold? Because obviously, take for example, if S4C said no, okay, as a result of the pandemic, we realise home working is actually a bit more advantageous to our workforce. As a result, we're probably going to be losing 20 jobs on site. They were already created, but now they have been lost. That probably actions a kind of a response to you, as in you start noting these things and calculating them. But without that kind of prompt, when do you start thinking, oh, actually the vacancies are still quite high? We're not actually realising the potentials.
So we, as you will be aware, Chair, this is very new to the portfolio. This hasn't been presented before, and we are still devising that strategy. But for me, I would say that at the annual review of the benefits that we will collate as an annual report, or whatever terminology we want to use, that is when we would be sitting down with the leads and saying, right, you haven't actually made any inroads this year now into the 46 vacancies. What are we going to do about it? What's our profile for getting these 46 jobs on site? And we would work with them then in order to ensure that those strategies are in place. And I would say that without having written it down yet, I'm happy to put a bit of a procedure in place to accompany all of the reporting documentation of the kind of the terms of reference of what we will do on an annual basis, etc. I'm happy to say that if proportionally, let's just say it's over a 10-year period, if we aren't delivering 10% kind of year on year, that we would sit down and have a mitigation strategy meeting with the individual respective leads to ensure that they are on track to deliver as they are saying they're going to deliver.
Okay, diolch. Councillor Morgan, then Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to come in on that, Phil. I mean, all I'd ask is when these benefits realizations come through, and I like the way that they're being presented, that the terminology is the same, it's consistent, because as I just mentioned about Aragon, it talks about 99.4 years, what have you, in terms of employment there. On page 16 of the annual report, construction jobs created to date for the digital arena, average of 120 per week over 52 weeks. An average of 122 per week for 52 weeks. I mean, I know my maths isn't, but I mean, you'd be talking tens of thousands of jobs. So again, why is that put in that way? And the Aragon is put in a slightly different way. So, consistency is really important, to get through so that the public understand it as well.
Yeah, that completely take our point, Councillor. I can answer the why it's done in that way. So the average of 122 over the 52 weeks provides you with the average number that were employed on site in any given week. The reason it's then multiplied through to give you a full-time equivalent figure is because if you take the 122 over 52 weeks, that's only single weeks. So it doesn't actually tell you that whether someone was employed for more than a few days, because obviously you've got a big variant of trades people within those figures, and scaffolders, for example, might only actually be on site for a week, but there might have been 25 scaffolders on site for a week, which would obviously give you 25 weeks worth of employment for one person, if you see what I mean. So I'm happy to look at that, and I'm happy to come back to the committee with some more standardized approach, I suppose, to the recording of the construction job specifically, because I think that is where the kind of ambiguity might fall, because of the nature of that employment. But I'm more than happy to take that away and try and come up with a consistent approach to reporting the construction jobs.
Great. If I could request that, Chair, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Councillor Morgan. Councillor Jones.
Sorry, yes, it was actually on that point that Giles just brought up. I see in part of the report form, you've actually got mechanism of measurement. So what exactly would that tell us at the end of the day?
So what that will tell you, that particular item is down to the individual projects to work with us to agree, but what it will tell you is how they are going to measure the delivery of the benefits. So for argument's sake, with jobs, it could simply be a case of counting the number of individuals that are employed full-time on the site during the operation of the delivery. With regards to things like GVA, it might be a revised economic or financial assessment done in conjunction with consultants based on all of the variable factors that support the things like gross value added. So things like the number of jobs created, to the number of investment, etc. So it will just outline how those figures have actually been derived, so that it's an understanding that this is where these figures have come from, and that they're not just plucked out of the air, so to speak.
So really, it's a consistency of approach, and each project should be calculated exactly the same way.
Yes. Okay. And if they won't calculate the same way, there'll be a reason for that, and that'll be explained in that particular element.
Okay, and on Aragon as well, we've actually mentioned, S4C, and we mentioned 102, full-time jobs. Are they actually new full-time jobs, or were any of them transferred in from other parts? I'm always, wary of that. They actually, like car plants, you could relocate a car plant, it would be a loss to one area and a gain to another area. So are these 102 brand new jobs?
They are 102 brand new jobs to the region. If they were displacement outside of the region, I couldn't tell you. But I can tell you they are 102 new jobs within the 4 authorities.
I think it's important that we actually find that out. You know, are they
My
newly
understanding,
created
Councillor Jones, is that they are jobs from Cardiff.
from Cardiff, so they're not new jobs?
They moved their jobs over from Cardiff.
yeah.
The new head office for SWC and other areas, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions they want to raise on this agenda item? No, I can't see any indications. Okay, so thank you very much for that, Phil. Swansea Bay City Deal annual report next. So can I have an indication of who is presenting this?
I think it's me again, Chair.
Yeah. Okay.
With regards to that, I'm happy to pull the report up and share on screen. I'm equally happy, given that from the discussions we've already had, I think members have already read and digested a lot of the reports. I'm also equally happy just to hand it back to you and field questions.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think we have already we've read it, and I think a number of questions have touched on some of the matters regarding the annual report. So people have the report in front of you. Do you have any questions on the content of that, or you? Councillor Llywelyn, Cynghorwr Llywelyn.
Yeah, it's not a question about the contents, to be honest, because we did refer to it in our pre-briefing and so on. We've covered a lot of the ground this afternoon. I don't normally ask for hard copies of things these days and try to make sure that I keep everything online. But I'm just wondering whether there are any hard copies available for reference of the report. I mean, I realise they may not normally be printed out in the old style, but if it was possible for one to be sent to me.
I'm sure we can have a discussion with us after the meeting in regards to that, Cynghorwr. Jeff, I think your hand is up from the last one.
Oh, yeah, I left it up, but I do want to actually ask.
Oh, yeah, okay, come in at this point then.
No, it is only perhaps a picky little thing, and perhaps I'm wrong here. You know, on the first page, they got executive summary, and they've got, 1.2 billion, the project. I thought it was 1.3 billion. We're talking about change. Why has that gone down?
Yeah, the original heads of terms that the city deal was signed up to, and what the city deal is based on, they were signed back in 20th of March 2017. Signed up to a total investment package of 1.274 billion.
Yeah.
So that's where the 1.3s come from. At the moment, and I'll touch upon it in the financial monitoring report in a short while. The current investment forecasts, I think, is demonstrating. Off the top of my head, it was I think it's 1.15 billion. So it's we're about 9% under our projected investment, but I can touch upon that in the financial monitoring, because you'll see quite a clear picture of how it's derived at that point.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that. Any other points that members want to bring up right now on the annual report? I can't see any. And then we move on to the highlight report. Again, that's you, Phil, isn't it?
It is.
So what
conscious.
Do you want to present anything initially?
I'm happy to give a very quick overview, Chair, but I'm equally happy if conscious of time, if you just want to pick up by exception.
Okay. Do you want to give a 2-minute quick overview of the key points, and then if anyone has any questions regarding that?
No problem at all. So I'll quickly go through the programmes and projects, starting with Iregan. The Phase 1 funding agreement is now in place, and a creative sector demand study has been ongoing for the last 2 months with the creative sector across South West Wales. The purpose of that is to ensure that the deliverables for Phase 2 are providing what the creative sector are looking for. The outcomes of that have been, or the anticipated outcomes are very positive, and the sector has given a good insight into a few areas that potentially we may need to look at to ensure that the maximum benefits are achieved. With regard to Pembroke Dock Marine, all of the partner funding agreements have now been signed, so that's the agreement with the accountable body and the agreement from the lead deliverer to their respective partners. The first meta deployment happened on the 17th of June, and the all catapults test buoy deployment contracts for the operation and engineering support are pending final approval and should be out to market very soon. With regards to the Swansea waterfront, 7172 the Kingsway, the contractor has now been appointed, and that is Bouygues, with an anticipated start date later on in the summer. There's a change request with regards to the innovation matrix, which is what we touched upon earlier, and that is it's gone through programme board in June, it's going to joint committee on the 29th of July, and that will be ratified by Welsh UK Gov officers following that joint committee on the 2nd of August, and that's the first to go through the system, which is partly why it's taken a little bit longer than we'd hoped. And the arena has agreed the terms of their agreement with the commercial tenants, and the hotel designs are progressing. Pentrowell have signed a memorandum of understanding with the financial markets. The tender for Zone 1 has gone to market, and it is due back in imminently, if not already in. And the procurement for the design of Zone 3 has been commenced. Digital infrastructure project has been working on their detailed design following agreement and sign-off by Welsh and UK government. Regional 5G workshops have been arranged for later on this month, and they are in the process of appointing the project management team. We are hoping that we will have the approval for the Holmes Power Stations project in the next few weeks, and the support innovation and low carbon will follow on in August 2021. I won't cover skills because we've already had a presentation on skills earlier on in the meeting. And campuses, the business case has been presented to the ESB and is progressing to the portfolio board on the 27th of this month. So following hopefully portfolio board, there'll be a recommendation that the business moves on to joint committee for regional approval, and then subsequently Welsh UK government approval thereafter. So very, very quick overview of where the projects are.
Fantastic, that's excellent. Thank you for that. Cynghorydd Llywelyn.
Yeah, just a very young. It's just a question that I flagged up in the last meeting, which wasn't called it, so we weren't able to progress to an answer on it. But it's on the Pembroke Dock waterfront marine. It's not so much about the actual economic development aspect of it, but during the course of the planning process, obviously, quite a lot of attention given to the to the heritage aspects of the location, the historic dockyard and so on. So it turned out to be quite controversial from that aspect. Obviously, it's primarily an issue for Pembrokeshire County Council because in planning terms, but it is a regional project. And I'm just wondering whether there is any mitigation at all that has or can be considered in the delivery of the project to try and safeguard as much as possible of the historic heritage aspects of it. I'm sure it's been given a lot of consideration. As I say, it's outside of my personal area, but just following the planning process, I could see that it was quite a high-profile issue. Which centrally involved a city deal project.
Phil?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Councillor. It is, it was, or it still is an area of contention, but I'm pleased to say the planning has moved forward. The planning has been approved. The design of the infrastructure developments, and it's, I know it revolves a lot around things like the old slip and things of that nature, were designed in such a way that if 5 generations down the line would like to reopen the historical elements and unearth what is essentially under the new development, it's been designed so that that's an easily achievable thing to do in the future, and that's been accepted by all parties, and planning has progressed and has been approved on that basis.
Thanks very much for that information.
That's great. Thank you for that insight. Does anyone else have any questions regarding this item? No, I can't see any. Thank you very much for that, Phil. Okay, so if we move on to the internal audit, so this is agenda item 11 now.
I think Jonathan
That's
Burns
already been covered, Chair.
Councillor.
Apologies. Okay, yeah. Then Rich is on to you for the financial monitoring report, if you may.
Thank you very much. This is a financial monitoring report to the end of December. There's been some timing issues with 2 joint committees being cancelled in April and May. And we've got an extraordinary joint committee in next week to finalise the financial statements and provide the year-end outturn position, which I can provide to you in a later scrutiny committee meeting. The way, just a bit of background behind it, the way in which we've had to structure the City Deal from an accounting perspective is to disaggregate the City Deal grant from the Joint Committee Administration function. So the Portfolio Investment Fund consists of the City Deal grant awards, and then the Joint Committee Administration functions, albeit is supported with a top slice of that, but it's accounted for as a separate operation to the grant. So I'll touch upon the PIF, or the Portfolio Investment Fund, first. To date, we've received 54 million. We're expecting receipt of this year's grant award in probably October, November this year. And it'll also be a larger award than the 18 millions we received based on the front loading of UK government. And that was on the basis of the portfolio business case going through the governance, going through the internal governance structures in the governments, and they seem content with that. So we currently paid out 11.2 million. That's got paid out on 1 project. Now, we've actually signed funding agreements with 4 projects in the last 3 months. So we're looking to release further funding imminently to, I think, the Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire are just working on claims to enable us to release the funds straight away to them in the coming weeks. So we can sort of get the ball rolling in releasing the funds, because they're of no use sitting in the central bank account, to be truthful. At the moment, now I know there was a question touched upon it earlier on. The original heads of terms was set up to a leverage investment of 1.274 billion. On current 15-year forecast, the portfolio is looking to achieve 1.147 billion. So we're currently about 126 million under the original heads of terms. It works out about 9%. Now, at this moment in time, even though we are down on investment, the GVA and jobs seem to be stable, and if anything, over what we signed up to. But it is worth noting it's within a 10% tolerance. So at the moment, all parties are content with how we're proceeding at the moment, and we'll continually monitor this on a quarterly basis just to give a full 15-year position on that. As I noted, the funding agreements have been signed with 4. We're currently in the process of signing up another 3. So we're looking to take a proactive view because we don't want authorities or projects waiting for approval from Welsh Government before we start conversations with looking at funding and distributing funding. So we're currently in dialogue with 3 projects at the moment to try and be proactive in order to release funds as quickly as we possibly can. The second part to the monitor is the joint committee. So this is the administration function, as I explained earlier on. So the administration function at present was it was underspent. We were predicting an underspend at that point. It was underspent. This particularly because of the COVID pandemic. There's been a lot of savings involved in that. Now it's worth noting that any underspends, it's not lost money or there's no grant going back. Any underspend will be transferred into a city deal ring-fenced reserve for utilisation in future years. So it's essentially it's not lost. It'll just roll forward until it's utilised in the coming years. On the balance brought forward on that reserve was 240,000. And at this point, in the way in which we accounted for it, we included the 1.5% top slice. So the anticipated reserve at that point was about 700,000. Reason that we presented it like that is because despite us sitting on quite a large reserve, we know that we're going to be running that the committee and support functions will be running at a deficit in years 4 and 5, and therefore that reserve will be used to offset that deficit in the latter years. So it's actually a timing issue rather than an accumulated reserve position. So that's a brief overview. I was conscious of time on the financial monitor, and I'd be more than happy to take any questions if you want further detail or clarity on anything in relation.
Yeah, if we can go into the report on the portfolio investment fund, where you've got a table where it breaks down the individual components, and then it talks about the city deal, private and public.
Yes.
The public variation is large, I would argue, 16.5%. So that's an investment down from 395 million to 330 million. That's quite a large variation. Can you talk more on that specifics?
Yeah, there was. If to be honest with you, the bulk of the variance on the public and the private was in relation to a revised project put forward by Neath Talbot. So the original heads of terms they signed up to, they actually signed up to 4 separate, distinct projects. The revised project that was approved, I think it was back in 2019 now, accumulated those into one project, which is the supported innovation low carbon growth. But as a result of that, there was a decrease in both public and private sector investment.
So the 65 million variation is largely one member authority.
It's largely, it's not solely, it's worth noting. There is other projects in there, but in large, it was on one revision. Yeah.
Okay, because obviously that brings it quite a lot closer to the city deals, to the 2 governments' investments now. I know, yeah, okay, it's about 70 million difference, but has that caused any kind of discussions between the 2 governments on that? Is there any bad tensions or?
No, it hasn't. Both governments were aware of the revision and they were indeed involved in the revision. So it was approved by joint committee and both governments at that particular point. So they were fully aware of the revision at that time, and this has been reflected to accommodate that. It's worth noting as well that you picked up on the public and the private. If I draw your attention to the city deal, you'll see it's short of 241.
Yeah.
Again, that's in relation to that particular revision. Now, that's my projection as of the date of this report. it doesn't mean that we've lost the 5.3 million. What it means is it's unallocated. So the authorities and the PMO will look later on in the year to see how they can utilise the 5.3 to leverage further private and public sector investment, and how they can utilise it to the benefit of the region.
And obviously the 56 million variation in private, that may be actually more concerning than the public investment, because this is essentially what the city deal is intended to do, is to try and leverage as much private investment in the region as possible. As you say, this is a projection or a forecast as of now, or as of whenever you wrote this report.
Mm-hmm.
We're still in a very turbulent time right now, with gosh knows what kind of forecasts and financial situation we're going to be in the coming years. At what point, because obviously we were talking about variance of maybe 10%, 8.79%, at what point do we start going, okay, you know, this is actually dropping below that 10% now? Do we start revising projects, or what interventions can be made at that point, and when will you be flagging up to the program management teams and that something needs to be urgently done on this?
Yeah, there is no tolerance actually set. With the UK government, and we're trying to look at delivery, what we can deliver for the investment. So there's a completely different there's a holistic approach to be taken to that. The way in which I'm looking at it is when the original heads of terms was signed on that 1.274 billion, how that figure was derived was 50% of the 1.274 was private.
Yeah.
And then the other 50% was made up of the city deal and the public sector. So public sector in totality was 50%, the private was 50%. So the way in which I'm looking at it at the moment is that if you added up the public and the city deal, so you come to 6.5, say, you're actually only just short from a 50-50 split across the board. So in my mind, all that's happened is the investment has shrunk. However, when you look at a holistic approach, and you can argue that the GVA and the jobs and the holistic benefits of it is stable, if not looking to exceed, then it's a question of achieving more with less, and that's in everybody's interests.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I get in a future report, can you break down the public investment again for us then on this, so we can see what all the partners are putting into it in terms of their contribution?
I can have a go to split it down further. I can certainly, I can split it down further. It might not be into the detail of the specific partners, but I can certainly split it down to give you an idea of what public sector funding is being, I suppose, brought to the table.
Okay. Phil, you want to come in?
I do. Sorry, Chair. It was just very quickly. I just wanted to add to what Rich is saying, and is that whilst there is a 9% variance from the heads of terms figure, and we spoke about the change process earlier on, even though the change process and procedure wasn't in place when that 9% was actually essentially approved by Welsh and UK government, that change has been approved. So essentially, if we were to look at it as the heads of terms figure, arguably the heads of terms figure has been reduced in line with that approval of the change of the project. So they've already been party to those discussions, and we could I don't think there could be clawback on that, because they have agreed that variance. So like you say, when is the threshold going to be that we start looking at the mitigation strategy? I don't think for that particular example we would need to, because they have approved that change. So they have accepted essentially that there's potentially 9% less investment going to be delivered, and they've accepted that.
That's great. Okay, thank you both for that report. We now are lower than a quorum as a committee, so we won't be able to take any decision making. We won't be able to make any formal decisions as of now. If I can thank Richard for that report, that's much appreciated. And
Mr. Chair, forgive me for interrupting. As we're not quorate, or rather as the committee is not quorate, it
Yes.
may be appropriate to call an end to the meeting, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I know we encounter these difficulties.
Yeah, I'm just about to do that. That's fine.
Okay.
So on 13, we can postpone that decision to the next meeting, as well as the future work program. So can I thank everyone for their attendance for today's meeting? Much appreciated. Apologies for all the technical issues. And can I thank all the officers for their attendance as well? Much appreciated. Diolch.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Rob, can we have an informal